G'day, Andrew Whitney here. If you know anything about Leica rangefinder cameras, you'll know that they're intrinsically different to other competitive camera designs. Whilst single lens and mirrorless cameras let you view, compose and focus your image through the taking lens using a ground glass screen and a pentaprism, or by examining a digital monitor at the back of the camera, with the Leica range viewfinder camera you view, focus and compose your image using what appears to be a relatively simple rectangular optical viewfinder situated above or to one side of the lens, rather like having a hole drilled through the camera body with some bright silver frame lines and a focusing patch suspended inside it. This direct viewfinder gives you particularly bright viewing because it's typically brighter and faster than the camera lens itself, and its rangefinder focusing gives you very good focusing accuracy with normal and shorter focal length lenses. It also creates a quieter, more responsive camera and a more compact body and lens. But this design has certain limitations. In particular, it doesn't allow close-ups very easily, and it suffers from a certain amount of parallax error due to the fact that the viewfinder views the scene from a slightly different position than does the lens, and so it lacks truly critical compositional and framing accuracy. And it tends not to work so well with long focal length lenses, longer than about 135mm, because the bright line frame becomes very small. For all these reasons, in the days of film photography, between about the years 1951 and 84, Leica made the Visoflex system for their screw and bayonet mount rangefinder cameras, which turns the Leica rangefinder body into a reasonably competent, if somewhat clunky, single lens reflex camera. Here's the most modern of them, the Visoflex 3, which was made to fit all M-series bodies and still works perfectly well today with the most modern digital M Leicas, such as this Typ240. It's a mirror box built around a hinged swing-up viewing mirror, a fixed ground glass focusing screen and a detachable viewfinder. It makes this rangefinder Leica ideal for the most exacting and precise close-up work, down to same size magnification and even closer, and it can be used with the special long focal length telet lenses of focal lengths 200 to 800mm made by Leica for it. Here's the Visoflex 3 in close-up. It has a 3-position setting knob on one side that lets you choose between 3 different mirror actions. In the red dot position, the mirror is locked up, which is how you typically use it with a digital Leica, because you can do your viewing on the camera's rear monitor or inside its accessory electronic viewfinder. Or in the yellow dot position, the mirror will flick up out of the way at the very last moment, just before camera exposure. Alternatively, in the black dot position, the mirror moves up as you push the shutter release lever down, so that when the lever actually depresses and releases the shutter button of the camera, the mirror is up and out of the way of the image light path. The mirror actuating lever has an adjustable plunger at the camera's shutter button, so that you can precisely synchronize its release depth with the requirements of the camera's shutter. The fixed ground glass is very fine in its definition, and it has a 1mm circle engraved on its underside to assist with focusing and to provide an image measuring reference. This 90-degree glass pentaprism viewfinder is detachable and can be replaced with a 45-degree or vertical viewfinder, or you could use a simple loop or a magnifying glass with it instead. If using the Visoflex with a Leica Typ240, you typically remove this pentaprism and fit the Typ240's electronic viewfinder instead. Although the pentaprism has the advantage of letting you set up, view and focus your shot very precisely without having the camera switched on, thus saving battery power for actual photography. At one corner of the Visoflex housing there's a standard screw-in thread for a common cable release, which will depress the plunger arm, raise the internal mirror and fire the camera shutter, and the underside of the housing features a 1/4 inch tripod thread, so that the camera is supported by the Visoflex rather than the other way round. At the back, there's a rotating locking lever that locks the housing onto any M bayonet Leica body, without having to rotate the Visoflex or the camera. Now, because this is a bolt-on accessory, it's not as streamlined, compact or as efficient in use as a proper SLR camera, and it suffers a major disadvantage in that the reflex mirror is added in front of the camera body instead of inside it, and this in turn has the effect of deepening the camera body to a total depth from the lens mount to the sensor or film of about 65mm instead of the usual 28.8. This in turn means that lenses of about 65mm focal length or longer must be used with it if you want to be able to focus at distant subject distances and at infinity. To demonstrate this, if I fit a 50mm lens to the front of the Visoflex, then the lens is so far away from the film or sensor that it tends to give me a highly magnified close-up of a very small subject area. And with a 35mm lens fitted, I'm photographing even closer and smaller. In order for either of these lenses to give me a sharply focused, distant view of a broad subject area, the lens would need to be sitting much closer to the film or sensor, as it does when normally attached directly to the camera without the Visoflex. So the Visoflex only really works in a truly versatile way with lenses of about 65mm focal length or longer. This brings us to the Leitz 65mm f3.5 lens, which Leica made especially for use on the Visoflex. This is the shortest focal length lens that you can use with it and still get distant and infinity focus. And you can see that when fully retracted for infinity focus, its rear element sits very close to the back of its mount and only just clears the Visoflex's internal swinging mirror. Let's take a closer look at this lens because there's a few things about it that are unusual. First of all, this is a Leitz design. So it's built for sharp image rendition at all subject distances without barrel or pincushion image distortion, rather than for fast speed. With a maximum aperture of f3.5, this isn't a fast lens by 35mm camera standards. Second, the focal length is unusual. At 65mm, it's 30% longer than a more common 50mm lens. And this makes it more useful for portrait work, where a longer focal length, typically used with a greater shooting distance, will help to prevent perspective distortion in the rendering of the head and facial features. Now Leica could have made it longer, but at 65mm it means that you can typically reach forward and manipulate close-up objects while you're viewing them through the camera, whilst with a longer focal length lens in place, such as a Leica 90mm lens, you're usually too far away. Third, the small lens elements used in this relatively slow lens have enabled the front of the lens barrel to be used as a deep surrounding lens hood, and you can add filters and more lens shading if desired at the front of the barrel. Fourth, the lens has not one but two f-stop rings. One of them is a preset ring, which lets you preset a desired f-stop setting, which you can then set simply by rotating the actual second f-stop ring until it's naturally braked by the preset ring. This lets you stop down the lens quickly from the back of the camera without having to look at the lens itself. Of course, with a true SLR camera, this stopping down action would be done automatically by the camera in the course of you pressing the shutter button to take the picture. Next, the lens has a detachable lens head, which can be attached to the accessory Visoflex bellows to provide focusing all the way from infinity to about same size reproduction and closer. And the removed helical focusing mount can be used with other Leica lens heads from normal Leica 90 and 135mm rangefinder lenses for attachment to the Visoflex also. Finally, the Elmar's focusing helicoid incorporates in its rear a circular paper bellows which functions as a light baffle and an elegant way to finish the inside of the back of the mount. How on earth would you make one of those? Leitz figured it out, but in my opinion it can be a bit of a liability, because when the lens is fully retracted for infinity focus and is typically stored that way, then condensation and mould can form in the compressed bellows, which can then migrate into the lens elements. Mine was like that when I received it from an overseas dealer, and I managed to clean it off out of the bellows with a soft toothbrush. So this particular lens should always be stored in its fully extended position, which draws out the bellows and also offers better protection to the now more deeply recessed rear element. So there it is, the Leitz Visoflex, with its special matching Elmar 65mm lens. It's an ideal setup for the Leica rangefinder user who occasionally wants to use his or her camera for close-up, portrait and copy work. See you next time.